Good morning.
Going to be a quick one this morning.
Good morning, Eric.
Good morning. It is March 15th, 2022. We're here for our regular County Commissioner Board meeting in the chamber. All three commissioners, the administrator, and the clerk of the board. And at this point, I'll call the meeting to order and ask you to please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. First item on the agenda is the approval of February 22nd County Commissioner meeting minutes. Is there any additions, corrections?
No.
Okay. Next thing on the agenda is the approval of vouchers.
We have one today. Move for approval of fund expenditures in a total amount of $505,303.39 as presented, and note that it has been reviewed and signed by two representatives of the auditor's office and the county administrator.
Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry.
Yes.
Could I ask for clarification? Would you restate the amount? I'm just a little bit different on my sheet than what I thought I heard you say.
$505,309.39.
Thank you. That's right.
Okay.
Second.
There's been a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Next, we have approval of consent agenda items 1 through 7.
Move for approval of consent agenda items 1 through 7.
Second, with discussion on items 1 and 2, I see our HR directors here.
We have a motion and a second for the approval of items 1 through 7 with discussion on 1 and 2. So proceed, Commissioner Peck.
Good morning, Eric.
Good morning.
We had quite a discussion last week regarding a no-notice grade change and step change to a position. And in that, you provided us some pretty good information on comparables, but you also were going to bring back some additional information, which you subsequently sent in an email. And it seemed to me, with as much discussion as we put on that position, we ought to at least hear from you on an overview for the benefit of other employees, for the public to hear what these two are about and the basis for them. So if you would summarize those, I would appreciate it. Thank you.
Of course. So the request from the prosecuting attorney for the reclassification for one of his deputy prosecuting attorney 1 positions is a little more straightforward. There wasn't a compensation analysis conducted for that, as it was a request from him to reclassify. In the 2022 budget, the board approved a DPA 1 position, and the prosecuting attorney is requesting that to be reclassified to a DPA 2 position based on the difficulties in recruiting a DPA 1. That position is typically one that you see kind of, law school graduates would be, type of an applicant that would apply for that position. We've been recruiting for that position for a number of months, haven't received any applicants for it, and so the prosecuting attorney feels it would be easier to recruit for if it was the kind of what would be the standard DPA level positions that he has in his office. And I don't know if he's in the room. Didn't see him, but that's kind of just a summary of his justification for that request.
Can you give us about the same level of detail on the facilities position, please?
Of course. So the facilities director for the 2022 budget requested a reclassification for the facilities and grounds coordinator position, which is currently at a grade 14. Recognizing that oftentimes there are projects, employees, vendors, different things going on across different county-owned properties that require more management, and so wanting to reclassify that position to be an assistant facilities director. That one, a compensation analysis was done, and that compensation analysis using our comparator counties landed that right around that grade 16 where the facilities director was requesting that be placed at, based on other internal comparator positions where other kind of that mid-level manager position, maybe not supervising all employees in a department, but some or certain aspects of a division within a department. I believe that request to be appropriately graded.
Okay, that's perfect, at least from what I wanted. Thank you.
Of course. Anything else?
No.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, we have a motion and a second on consent items 1 through 7. All in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. Next, we'll move down to Commissioner Administrator updates. Keith.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Past week, attended the Wasatch Virtual Assembly, some discussion of behavioral health for ASOs across the state and their communication strategy. Legislature's finally wrapping up some of their work. Been following some of the legislation affecting Franklin County. Participated with the Voluntary Stewardship Program work group for a update and a planning session for going forward. There's a lot of work being done with conservation efforts in Franklin County, working with landowners, farmers in particular, to implement those voluntary stewardship program goals and objectives. We participated in a short conversation with congressional delegation representatives. They're asking for submission of proposals for congressionally designated spending projects. So we're working on some of those ideas. And then it's still working on formulation of our behavioral health advisory committee and looking to get nominations to fill those positions for that advisory committee. Those are the major things I've been focused on.
Commissioner Peck.
This past week has been wrap up on the legislature reviewing the final budgets, coordinating with the various agencies, the CRAB board and others, on how the budget came out and how we're going to apportion funds, or try to. Council of Governments meetings ×3 last week, including the Rural Revolving Loan Fund, which we approved a loan for local business. WASAC meetings, we had the same one that Keith attended yesterday, the weekly Monday update. That one was with the Healthcare Authority, which provided a lot of good insight as to what direction Healthcare Authority is going with respect to ASOs. HAFIC meeting yesterday, in which we approved a loan for another local business. Discussions with the Port of Pasco. As I mentioned previously, the state legislature has created a new advisory committee to advise the legislature on aeronautics and aviation and the commercial applications of those in the state of Washington. It's through the Department of Commerce, meetings with the port, or port staff, I should say, regarding our airport and what sort of needs they see that this committee might advise the legislature to provide. That meeting has that group has its first meeting tomorrow. This was just created by the legislature in 2021, and there will be 3 meetings this year for that group. Thanks.
Commissioner Mullen?
So with the, in regards to like the local cattlemen and whatnot, the Washington State Board of Health has pulled back their, basically proposing more restrictions against the cattle producers. And they pulled that back, but they are going to propose a new rule on pet and livestock owners, making them responsible for any animal waste from becoming a health hazard or nuisance. But it has backed away from regulating the commercial livestock operators. The new rule that they're going to put out will authorize local health officials to investigate complaints about animal waste, fouling any water or destroying or impacting anybody else's property. Unlike their previous proposals, the rule won't complement laws that are already being applied to dairies and feedlots and other confined livestock operators that are being enforced by the State Department of Agriculture and the Department of Ecology. Also, the Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife is seeking public comment on proposed rule changes to address wolf and livestock conflict deterrents from now until April 11th. And if you're interested in that, you can find that on the WDFW website for more information. Also met with local constituents about planning and building, and I believe we have a path going forward on those. I spoke with Derek at planning and building, and we're in need of new planning commissioners. There's a couple vacancies that they need to get filled as soon as possible. So if anybody is interested in serving on this board, please reach out to Derek in planning and building. Thank you.
All right, so I attended the Port of Pasco meeting, and they're on the move. They're doing a lot of things. Of course, a lot of things are happening around here in Franklin County. Then I had the Ben Franklin Transit meeting, where I proposed that we move back the 0.01%, 0.06% to 0.05%, that we roll back 1/10 of 1%. And then Director Bloom indicated that the didn't take a vote of the public to do that the directors could do that. So we have two resolutions going on next meeting for the directors to roll back the 0.01%, but if the directors roll it back and there's a change in the directors, then they can put it right back on. I propose that we allow the people to vote on this, because I've had lots of concerns from the public on the fact that they're seeing buses run around empty, and that it's not justified for these big diesel pushers to be running around town, so that we allow the people to speak. And therefore, we need to put it on the ballot. So there's two resolutions at the next meeting. If you have any input on this, please show up for the next Ben Franklin Transit meeting and voice your concerns. But I think the people of Franklin and Benton counties are suffering through the same inflationary rates as these entities, and therefore they're entitled to a little break on taxation. So I'm proposing that we have two resolutions, and they're both going to be on the meeting agenda next week, to roll back by the directors immediately, and then to give it to a vote of the people to repeal it permanently. And then planning and building, I've had another phone call here talking with a person that witnessed an individual from our planning and building department getting into a shouting match with a person from Pasco. And she said it was very unprofessional. And Keith, again, I'm asking you to do a review of our planning and building department for efficiency and effectiveness, because we're still getting complaints. So I encourage you to reach out and talk to them, especially about the meeting that transpired. And you've got an email on it, because she told me that she sent you an email this morning on it. You'll have it in your email box. Please reach out and talk to her, ask her about what she witnessed, and then please talk to the planning and building department, because we're still getting complaints. That is the end of my week in summary. So next we'll go to public comment.
George Dockstetter. I've got several questions I'd like to get answered, but first, I'd like to say something that happened at the last meeting. Sort of bothered me, and then I got to really thinking about it. Keith said that the tribe who's doing the casino wanted to meet with each of the commissioners as individuals, instead of coming to a public meeting and stating what they're wanting or what's going on. That sort of disturbs me in the fact that what's going on, that they have to meet with you individually. And then what happens if they want to bring something before the county? Are all three of you going to have to recuse yourselves from any action that they request? The improprieties look unfavorable on you as individuals by going and meeting with them singularly instead of having them coming before the county commissioners as a group. I don't know what they want to discuss, and I could care less, but it does not look appropriate. And second, Ben Franklin Transit, I don't know why you're asking for .01. Should be .02. And the problem I've got with that is that only the people that live within the district, the transit district, can vote. But every dime I spend in Pasco or Benton County, they get a chunk of my money and I have no say about it. And that's the only thing that ticks me off on that. A couple other questions I have is I'd like to know where we're at and what's being talked about on where we're going to spend the $7 million COVID money. And another question is where are we at in the redistricting? Question came up, somebody asked me whether we do the redistricting that you voted on or the court puts in a different system or different districts. Are all three county commissioners going to have to rerun? Or is it just when term's up, do you have to run? And then like to know where we're at with the growth management plan that was approved by the county commissioners and turned down by the growth management board over on the coast. I'd like to know where we're sitting on that and what we're doing about it. Thank you.
I'd like to respond just with the meeting with the Paulville Tribe. I did have a meeting with them about 10 days ago, but it was just a simple meeting and it was my recommendation that he bring his information before the board, not to meet individually, but to actually get on the agenda. So,
Keith, do you want to respond to those questions?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, before we go there, since one commissioner's already responded, the rest of us have the equal opportunity. I've argued from the day that we got the email that meeting with them privately was inappropriate for a long list of reasons, not the least of which is we're in the middle of a decade-and-a-half long effort to reconvey federal shorelines on the McNary Pool on the Columbia River from Corps of Engineers ownership back to local governments, municipalities, counties, cities. The Yakima tribe is the tribe that ceded the shorelands that are along the Snake and Columbia in Franklin County. The Yakima tribe has put in writing a letter to the Colville declaring that efforts by the Colville to develop activities in King City, in the words of the letter, it's public record, is, quote, an act of war, unquote. So for us to meet with the Colvilles about developing in King City and to meet privately at the same time that we're trying to work with the Yakimas on land reconveyance has to be one of the poorest ideas I've seen. So, Mr. Dockstetter, thanks for bringing that up. There's a couple of other things that you mentioned. I'll just say quickly that the redistricting status is something that we can get our legal folks to brief up on, but the fact of the matter is the plaintiffs have come back. They've asked for a trial date. It'll probably be April, May is my guess. And my understanding of the statute is that should we lose, that there would likely be elections for all commissioners next year. But confirm that with legal. Thanks.
So if I may add, the reason they filed for a court date is somebody from our clerk's office alerted them that they were running out of time. And I'm looking into that. I'm trying to figure out who from this courthouse alerted the attorneys to make a motion for a court date. So go ahead, Keith.
Okay. First, on the meetings with the Paulville Tribe, they requested an opportunity to meet before the board, but because of this delicate issue with the Yakima Tribe, that was my recommendation for them to first meet individually with members of the commission. I'm clear on my direction now that that's not the preference of the board, and so we'll have them come publicly before the board next Tuesday, and I think they're more than willing to accommodate that public presentation. As far as the growth management plan, we have submitted our response to the growth hearings board, and we're in the process of waiting to hear back on that. I would note just tangentially, the city of Kennewick had a similar challenge to their growth boundary filed by the same organization that's challenged ours, but it was, after it was heard in court, city of Kennewick was successful in defending their growth boundary, and so we're optimistic that there's some positive potential for Franklin County to have the same benefit that in the city of Pasco. That's really the issue that we're dealing with, is the approval of the growth boundary, urban growth boundary, and we're hopeful that we can get that resolved and continue to move forward.
What was our response?
It was defending the process that we went through to come to the plan. There were some things in there that we agreed with, but a few things in there that we didn't agree with. It's difficult for me to explain in detail some of the technical components of that response, but our attorneys have drafted that response, and it will be publicly available.
So along the tribes there, Keith, in our scheduled meeting Thursday, I mentioned to you that until they resolve their conflict with the Yakima, that it is of no use for us to meet with them. Until that has been resolved, they need to work it out with the Yakima tribe before we ever meet with anybody, including in this room right here, because it's not going to do any good.
So is that my instruction then, is to not have them at all before the board until they resolve that issue?
Well, if they're at war with one another, do we want to get in the middle of that?
We certainly don't want to get in the middle of that.
I don't think so.
We can't commit to a course of action that supports action one way or another until that issue is resolved.
So as one commissioner, I would say that I would decline a meeting until that's resolved. I'm just one commissioner, though. I'm waiting for the other two to speak up.
So my view is that we should offer equitable exposure to all entities, whether they're tribes or community groups. And we have had discussions with the Umatilla on the shoreline reconveyance. We've had personal meetings with them. We're set to have meetings with the Yakima on shoreline reconveyance. I think it would be proper for us to be equally available to the Colville. The distinction I'm making is the same one I made earlier, which it needs to be done publicly in the light of day. If we do that, then I think everybody gets a fair opportunity and access to the board. I would not support speaking with the Yakimas on one issue and declining to speak with the Colvilles on another.
Well, shoreline management's different from putting in a casino.
What's not different is fair and equitable access to this
Exactly.
board in the public for all entities.
But what
That's
you're-
not different.
What you're speaking of is shoreline management.
Actually,
We
it's
need to
not.
have the topic of what we're meeting them about, and it's not shoreline management.
It's not about shoreline management, Chairman. It's about equitable, open, public access for all entities and all tribes.
And I agree.
Good,
But that's
thank you.
on the purchase and the establishment of a casino on Yakima. We don't know whose land it is. We have to have clarification.
These lands were
That's
ceded more than a century ago. It's not
And
Colville
who's it
land, it's
ceded
not
to?
Yakima land. It was ceded to the public, which is why it's appropriate for us to be open and transparent and
On
let
the
any
topic.
tribes, excuse me. Any
Excuse
tribe-
me, I was talking before you interrupted me, Commissioner Peck.
Are we going to go down this road
Yes,
again?
we are, because I'm the chairman.
Go ahead, say all you want. Go ahead.
We need to have the topic established that we're talking to them about, and it's not shoreline management. It's a whole other topic, and so that topic needs to be put forward of why we're meeting with them.
Since I
And that's
brought
fine.
this
Put it
up,
on the agenda.
since I brought this up, this is petty crap.
Yes, it is. Thank you.
And it doesn't matter if they're at war with each other. If they're going to be in the community, they have the right to come before county commissioners like I do or anybody else in this room. It doesn't matter what the hell they want to talk about. They've got the right to come in here and speak to you just like I do. And so you don't have to agree with them, you don't have to vote on anything, but they got the right to petition the government. They're citizens of this country. Thank you.
Thank you.
I would like to respond. Like I said, I did have a very brief meeting with the Paulville Tribe, and basically the whole gist of the meeting was to say, you need to come before the board, because I didn't discuss anything outside of, this is the procedure. If you want to get on the agenda, to contact with Karen, our clerk of the board, and bring it before everyone so everybody can hear what they have to say. And my door is always open, and that's why I've met with them, because everybody should have equal access to us. And I'm fine with having them come forward at the agenda. I think we should stay out of the any conflicts that's going to get us involved with the Yakima, but they do have the opportunity to come and speak before the board. So I'm in support of that. I'm not in support of meeting them individually. Like I said, my door was open for the meeting, and I says this is the procedure on how you need to get onto the agenda, to either contact the chairman of the board or the clerk of the board to set up that agenda. Thank you.
So Keith, with that, I think that if we're going to schedule a meeting with Colville, we need to reach out to the Yakima so they have equal opportunity to come in and say their piece. Because the conflict is between the two of them. If we're going to meet with one, we got to reach out to the other.
Well, I would somewhat disagree with that. I think that if Yakima wants to talk to us, they should set up a time and agenda to come forward. I don't believe it's our obligation to reach out to them. If Colville wants to come and speak with us, they should get on the agenda. We should hear what they have to say. And if Yakima wants to come speak with us, they should follow the same procedure. That's just my thoughts. But I definitely don't want to get in the middle of their dispute.
I concur with Commissioner Mullins' analysis.
Okay, there you have it. Is there anybody else for public comment?
Approach the bench.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
I'd like to make a personal health comment, not a public one, but I'm speaking in public, of course. I'm going to make an assumption that you, each of you individually who's hearing my voice, care about your families a great deal. That there's probably nothing that you wouldn't do if you saw your family in harm's way couldn't do to try to stop that or mitigate it. I've given you evidence after evidence after evidence that there is no one, and I'm not trying to cast aspersions, there's no one that I have seen locally or on the stage of the government at the state and federal level who care anything about you or your family. And I could certainly cite a lot of evidence, but I've put two of them before you. Ivermectin on that list is on page 9 of the World Health Organization's list of essential medications. It's not horse paste. It's not going to kill you. And in fact, you might find that it actually helps in many diseases, so much so that, by golly, they got a Nobel Prize out of it. But yet we're supposed to believe, by mainstream media and others, that somehow it's going to hurt us in using it to fight other issues, other diseases. The second sheet is again, represents the deaths. Deaths you can't hide. Deaths are counted. We are in excess death right now, and we continue right underneath what we did last year. Why? If you're waiting for the state, if you're waiting for the nation, NIH, who spent 2% of their budget in 2020 on fighting COVID, meaning studies, research, for the most deadliest thing that we've ever faced, right? 2%. If you're waiting for that to come to us, it's not going to happen. What am I saying? Do you love your families? I do. So I've done everything I can to find out what's going on and how to protect them. If you think what we just saw as far as the governmental overreach in the last couple of years is going to end, it's not. I mentioned several months ago that the next step was war. It's not our war, but everything that I see, our leaders are trying to get us into it, aren't they? Why? Well, it distracts us. What I'm asking you to do, you have a lot of brain power in this county, and it's really the only thing we have control over. You have control over. Maybe not even that. I don't know how the health department runs here. 70% of the fertilizer comes from where? Russia. DEF, urea, Russia. How are you going to move your tractors? How are you going to move the trucks? How are you going to protect our lives? When my doctor denies me a prescription for ivermectin because she would be fired if she gave it to me, we are in trouble. We are in trouble. I'm telling you that you have the brain power and the wherewithal in this county to get some really good advice you can trust. It takes leadership to draw that together so that the community, that we as your constituents can trust and follow. The death rate right there that you see tells you plain out, flat out, that everything that we've done mitigating-wise hasn't worked. And it's not going to work. But everything that could help us was ignored, vilified, or censored. No discussion, no talk, no debate, no this way or the highway. You can see where that has got us and is still here. The biological experimental agent they call a vaccine, which is not a vaccine. You're going to see, we are going to see the results of that for your entire life. I'm asking you to protect us by stepping out somehow, some way, and gathering your assets and your forces in this state, which only really is Benton and Franklin County, and do something that will help save our lives, our liberty, and whatever pursuit we're going to have. Resources are going to collapse. The banks are going to collapse. Our medical system is going to collapse. And it's by design. That's my opinion, mine alone. That's what I'm observing. I hope I'm wrong. I pray I'm wrong. I want you also to know that I pray for each of you. My wife and I both pray for each of you and all of our leaders. That somehow, some way, the right path would be chosen. That you can stand up and be steadfast in your convictions and help us to live, help us to feel and exercise freedom. And that's all I've got to say this morning. Thank you so very much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else for public comment? Anybody on the phone?
No one on the phone.
Anybody else for public comment? Seeing none, we'll move down to the administration office business. Keith?
I don't believe I have anything else that's not on the agenda already.
Okay. We're to the second public comment. Anybody for public comment?
I'd still like to know what we're gonna do with the COVID money, or if you're gonna put it out to the public, or if we're gonna handle it in this room, in the courthouse. Thank you.
Keith, go ahead.
Yeah, happy to respond to that. Yeah, thank you for reminding me. We've had some approvals for some of the money that's spent, but not all of it. We're still gathering data on additional programs. The only one we've really committed to is the, in terms of major projects, is the commitment to upgrading our electrical and airflow systems at the Happel Center. And then we've had some items that are approved in our 2022 budget. It's across a number of different departments, but we have not committed the bulk of the money yet. And like I said, we're still entertaining proposals and gathering project proposals for some of those things. And those run a variety from infrastructure assistance in water and sewer projects in Franklin County, some business development type grants through the local chambers of commerce, and a number of other projects that are being considered. Those proposed projects would be brought before this board for approval. It may be worthwhile to have a broader public discussion, if that's the will of the board, to get additional proposed projects, but so far we've received quite a few proposed ideas to use some of those funds.
Good morning, Commissioners. Last night at the City Council meeting, on their workshop meeting, they did have the item on their discussion list for support and or paying for part of the upgrades to the Happel Center. I would certainly encourage you to reach out to them. The budget was unknown to them. I think they had 3 point something to maybe 7 point something million as proposed cost needs there. And you've heard me say this before. I think that we really need to pay attention to the parking lot. If it goes much further, we're going to lose it, and it's going to be much more expensive than if we resurface it and take care of it now. And would certainly encourage you to get the city of Pasco to pay their fair share of maintaining that county facility. Thank you.
Yeah, I've met with the city and that's what precipitated that discussion at their workshop, so we're having that open discussion.
Okay, is there anybody else? Public comment?
No callers.
Seeing none, we'll move down to executive session. Keith, you want to take us into this executive session?
Yes. Would request an executive session for 30 minutes under RCW 42.30.110, paragraph 1, subparagraph I, potential litigation. Would ask that the members of the Board of Commissioners, myself, the clerk, the prosecuting attorney, and the chief civil deputy be allowed to participate in that discussion. Up to 30 minutes. We may come out early, but give ourselves adequate time.
We're into discussion right now with Ben Franklin Transit on executive sessions. He sent me some RCWs that we cannot come out early on executive sessions. We've had a lengthy discussion with Ben Franklin Transit on it, so that I would suggest that we go 10 minutes with the ability to extend.
Okay.
Who's requesting the executive session?
The prosecuting attorney's office and myself.
Then I'd recommend we find out their recommended timeline.
I would suggest maybe 20 minutes.
Jed's on the phone.
What's the recommended time for this
I
executive
think
session?
I only need a couple minutes on the earlier matter. So Jen, how much time do you need on yours?
Maybe about 10, about 15 minutes total.
Let's go 15 and then we'll extend if necessary.
I'm fine with that.
I'm asking for clarification because we got into a lengthy discussion. I said, listen, as long as we announce that we can come out early, you're telling the public you're coming out early. You can't do that, he says. This is Jeremy Bishop. So I'm trying to get to the bottom of this to make sure everything we're doing is illegal, but I think we should follow those guidelines until we get clarity.
We certainly look at that.
I have no objection to that. I certainly want to do things in the right process, and I was just trying to make it a little more, less time consuming. That's fine. 15 minutes.
Yep.
15 minutes from now.
We'll start
so
with 15 minutes.
About
Yeah.
56.
Okay, we've come out of executive session. And is there any other business for the good of the county? Hearing none, this meeting is adjourned.